Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my finest friends. Welcome to a special episode at the end of season 6 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalog, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. And today's episode is a conversation with my co-host, John Paulsen. So after last week's episode, we were chatting offline a little bit about Pack Up the Plantation and what the plan was on the podcast to do that. So you pitched the idea that, you know what, let's just do an episode and cover it. So I thought that would be a grand idea, and here we are.
Yeah, I didn't think you were going to be doing a track-by-track breakdown of a live album. So this is a good way to kind of cover it. And it was kind of an important album, I think, in his discography. Certainly I think I bought it because it had quite a few hits on it.
Yeah.
And it was my way. I mean, people forget back in the day, some people forget back in the day, funds were limited for CDs. You couldn't just go out and buy, or albums. You couldn't just go out and buy whatever you wanted unless you had a lot of money, because the tickets or CDs were very expensive, $15 or more sometimes. And so you had to make some business decisions. And one of them was, Pack Up the Plantation had quite a few hits on it. It allowed me to dig into his catalog a little bit without having to buy all the albums until I was ready to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I came to this a lot later, and I do have it on vinyl now. So I was wondering, you obviously, because with the CD version, you're missing 2 songs. So did you? I'm assuming you went back and listened on Spotify so that you got the full 16, because I know on the CD you didn't get I Need to Know or You Got Lucky. That was LP and cassette only.
Oh, you're reminding me of that. I don't remember missing those at all. So I've been listening to this Spotify version of it. So this is the LP version that's on Spotify now. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it must be, yeah. So released in 85, I mean, it hit number 22 on the US chart, which is pretty good for a live album, really, actually.
They had a couple of singles off of it.
Yeah.
The Birds cover at the start. So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, and I believe Needles and Pins, right, with Stevie Nicks.
Needles and Pins again charted at 37, 17 on the rock chart, which is, again, that's pretty awesome. So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star charted at 9 on the rock chart, but didn't chart in the main chart, which again is, I don't know, it's quite unusual. But I think that, Needles and Pins, at least you're getting a bit of Stevie Nicks star power as well in 85. Probably bumps it up a little bit.
Yeah, you're right about the track listing for the CD. Didn't realize those 2 tracks were missing.
Okay, so when we were talking about this, obviously we're not going to go through. I'm certainly not going to go through and do a track by track breakdown. But I thought what was interesting was going back and listening to how those songs differed from the album versions, which is always a fun thing to go back and do, and then also with the covers, listening to how different, if much, they were from the original. So that's kind of what I went back and focused on. So I thought what we could do is pick off maybe a couple of highlights that we wanted to talk about, and then maybe just sort of run through in really quick order the rest of the track. So what if I said to you, what are the 3 standouts on this album? Which ones would you go for? And I'm kind of pitching this to you with no warning, and I know, so you might need a bit of thinking time, but what 3 songs would you pick? Sort of,
Definitely number 1, I would say, is the live version of Breakdown. This is my favorite live version of Breakdown. I love the opening where Tom sings the first part of the first verse, and then the crowd takes over, and you can really hear them at the Wiltern singing the words pretty clearly, and going all the way into the chorus. And you can see how much fun they're having with the band playing basically the song for them while they sing.
Yeah.
And really, gets crescendos during the chorus, because everybody knows the chorus. Of course, some of the fans there didn't know the verses, so they weren't singing as loudly. But you get into the breakdown, and they go ahead and give it to me and all that. And then you even hear the breakdown at the portion 2, and then they all cheer. And then Tom's like, got the quip, you're going to put me out of a job.
Yeah.
And they all are cheering, which don't put, let's not put Tom Petty out of a job, please. Don't cheer his unemployment. And then what I liked about what he did is he went back. A lot of artists, when the fans will sing the first verse or 2 or get in the chorus or whatever, they'll just pick up with the next verse.
Yeah.
And skip that first portion. but he went back to the second verse and then got back into the chorus. You got to hear that kind of twice, which I think was nice. And that ended up, making it a pretty long song. I mean, it was 7 minutes and 43 seconds. But typically when I listen to Breakdown, I will listen to this live version if I'm in, certainly in the mood for live music. But I think this is the best one that was available that he's released. I just love that interaction with the crowd at the start. It gives me goosebumps every time I hear it.
Well, it's funny because it's definitely not the longest live version of Breakdown that's kicking around, right? I mean, I think the version on official live leg that's crazy long. I think that's 9. Is it? Where I'm gonna have a look. Oh no, it's not on live leg, is it? That's right. But the one they've got the one at the Capitol. I think it was one at the Capitol. That one's around 9 minutes, and they don't have a lot of that crowd interaction. But of course, this was one of those songs where they just vamp, and Tom's doing all the stuff at the end about,
Oh yeah.
What does he sing at the end of that one?
Yeah, he goes into a great. You've heard different versions of his spiel where he's like, I'm going to treat them. I'm an adult situation. This is
there you go. That's
this adult situation. That whole part is hilarious too. Thanks for reminding me on that. That part is great. And then he gets into his and they kind of the song sort of concludes after that. I would say after Breakdown, the number 2 that really the standout moment for me is Insider. Yeah. Even though that wasn't recorded at the Wiltern, it's with Stevie Nicks, and hearing a live version of those two singing together is fantastic. And I'd have to think about like maybe what my third highlight. It's tough because there's a number of hits that are nice to see on here and to hear live versions with it. I think maybe Needles and Pins. That song has kind of grown on me as I've listened to this album a number of times here for this podcast, and it's got a I don't know if it's a key change when they say because I saw her today towards the middle or towards the end, and it's just Tom does it. I listened to the Searchers version of it, and they're both really effective. And I think it's a song that maybe it's part of that early British invasion timeline. A really good song that I didn't know that much about prior to re-listening to it a bunch of times today or this week.
Yeah, and I mean, those two songs, Insider and Needles and Pins, what I like about this is you can tell that it's not like Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous where they've basically just re-recorded most of it in the studio. You can tell this is live off the floor because, especially on Needles and Pins, Stevie's a little bit either side of the needle. She's not like absolutely dead on every part of it, but the soul you get from that and just the way that those two sing together, it's just dynamite, absolute dynamite. Again, you can see why she wanted to join the band, right? Because she loves singing with Tom Petty. That's so clear.
Yeah, and it's not a big surprise that 2 of my 3 highlights are the 2 songs that Stevie sings on, because it's so much fun to listen to them sing together live.
Well, and the other part is that there's no horns on those ones, which was my own, and I've written that down. That's my only, because I think that is the sort of the gold standard version of Breakdown, the best sort of live version of Breakdown we have. So therefore, probably the best version of the song. And Stan's drums are immense when they kick off. Just listen to the drums next time you listen to it, how big they are. They've really captured Stan and he's laying into it. But again, that sax solo, it doesn't ruin it, but it's like, you don't need that in there, dude. You got Mike Campbell. Let's let him play more. Let him solo.
It's the mid 80s. The sax was huge. Like you can't resist. Well,
it's the Southern accent store, so they've got the horns for the other songs, right? So I totally get it, but it's like, that's that one just tiny little fly in the ointment for me. Needles and Pins is fantastic. And like I said, when I was went back and listened to the original, it's a slightly, the live version that Tom does, it's a slightly, I'm going to use the word sloppy, not to be sort of disparaging about musicianship, but it's got a looseness to it. It's a bit more groove rather than sort of that real 4 on the floor, British invasion type beat. And it just suits the Heartbreakers so well, and I absolutely love it. But yeah, Insider is, if you hadn't chosen that one, I was going to end the call immediately because, again, Stevie is just on fire on that song. That's probably the best I've heard her sing live, to be honest with you. I've listened to a few Fleetwood Mac live performances and sort of a couple of her, when she did the Belladonna tour. I don't think her voice ever sounded better than it did on this record.
Yeah, and back to Needles and Pins, Jack Nitsky and Sonny Bono co-wrote that, and then the Searchers made it, I think it was the first one to make it a big hit. Yeah,
I think that someone else did it before, did they not? Jackie DeShannon. Yeah, she did the first version of it. I think they actually probably wrote it for her then. It would be my guess. So we think about that too, right? So Needles and Pins, that's from 64. And you've got the other the other covers we've got in here, one's from 59, one's from 66, 67, and then Stories We Can Tell is from 72. But it's them leaning back into all those early influences, and I like that they do that. So a lot of contemporary bands will, if they're going to do a cover, sometimes it'll be a bit more of a recent cover, or they'll try and interpret something or whatever. But I like a band that goes back to those old rock and roll staples, which is what Tom and the Boys always did if they're going to do covers, right?
So you said Insider is one of your highlights. So what would you say the other two were?
Also Breakdown. But I also think Refugee. I think that again, I think that's the best live version I've heard of Refugee. And that's where I think the horns actually on that one do a good job, because they really push that ending. It builds that huge crescendo, and you've also got, Benmont and Mike trading licks in the middle, and then they drop everything right out. So that version of Refugee to me is just dynamically and sonically is just superb. So those would be my three.
So what did you make of we talked about Needles and Pins. What did you make of the other there's 4 other covers on this album, live album. What did you make of them?
Yeah, so You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star. It's a song that they did actually quite a lot. So I was going to ask you, we were doing little sort of quizzes and things the other week or last week. So how many times overall do you think Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers played So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star? Because it is in the top 5 covers that they did live.
Quite a bit. I mean, I think they were playing it quite a bit in the mid 80s. I was just looking at that tour in 85.
Yeah.
And they were playing it in every show. So I don't know, 50 times?
108.
Oh.
108 times. It's the 32nd most played song live for the band, which is interesting. Yeah. And I mean, there's another song on this album that's actually the 24th most played song. So, or joint 24. So yeah. I like that song. I mean, it's the Byrds. I love the Byrds. Who doesn't love the Byrds, right? And they do a good job of it. It is like when you listen to the original version, I think that's Tom not wanting to bugger about too much with that song, because he wants to really pay homage to Roger McGuinn and everything. So it is a pretty straight cover. Again, I think the horns are okay in that one. But I love the big harmony. So you've got Howie, Stan definitely in there, and probably Benmont as well, throwing those harmonies in there. So I think it's a great track. It's a very good album opener.
Yeah, and Tom obviously loved the Byrds. He played this song a lot, but then he covered Feel a Whole Lot Better for Full Moon Fever. Mr. Tambourine Man, he did a cover of live, and then I know that's a Dylan song, but the Byrds made it famous and made it their own. And then he did 4 covers with Roger McGuinn on the Live at Fillmore set, 4 in a row. It Won't Be Wrong, You Ain't Going Nowhere, Drug Stop, Truck Driving Man, and 8 Miles High. Yeah, which I think that just shows Tom's appreciation for McGuinn and how much he liked his music and just liked him as a friend, because they got to be very friendly. Yeah. After McGuinn, I believe, heard American Girl and quipped that when did he record that? Yeah, the sound vocals just. But I mean, I think it's nice, and you look at that whole third disc of the Fillmore, it's all covers. Yeah. And when they brought on McGuinn, he didn't just come for 1 or 2. I mean, 2 is the typical, when you have a guest spot, but he came on and played 4 at least, and they included 4 on the CD, which I think is a nice tribute to the Byrds and to Roger McGuinn.
Well, man, if you got Roger McGuinn there, you may as well use him, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, I mean, they love playing those songs clearly. So why wouldn't you? So I guess the next one to talk about then is Don't Bring Me Down, which was originally by the Animals, and I think that one was released originally in 66. One of the best years in history, because England won the World Cup in 1966. So the year I always like. So what? I was listening to that, and again, it's not a song that I listen to a lot. And going back to it, it's like, yeah, of course I know it because I listened to the Animals growing up, but it kind of reminds me, there's a key change in that one where it really reminds me of Sharp Dressed Man. There's that big step up key change, and it's still just C, F, and G, but it's when they go to G, it really reminds me of that. But there's also that bit of where Stan's playing the kick and the snare at the same time. That's kind of got that Born to Be Wild feel to it. So there's these weird little crossover elements that come in, but it's again, it's a pretty faithful cover. But when it was recorded in 78. Can you imagine how much that would have taken the roof off, eh?
Yeah,
just amazing.
It's a banger. And you mentioned the highlights of it. That one was at the Paradise Theater. You mentioned that was the first song that was recorded that ended up on this album in terms of the oldest song.
Yeah.
And the Animals. I think you're looking at a lot of this kind of 60s garage rock, British Invasion type stuff, and you can really see how Tom was influenced by it.
Absolutely.
More so than maybe the Allman Brothers, who he was around in terms of the South and the biggest thing in the South. He was really influenced by these wildly different bands like the Byrds. I mean, it's kind of California folk rock, and then the Animals as well. I'm sure this is a great one to see live. They did a great job with it.
When I was looking at the set list from that gig, 13 songs, 5 covers. So they did it. So they opened Anything That's Rock and Roll, Fooled Again, I Need to Know, Don't Bring Me Down is the 4th track, You're Gonna Get It, Breakdown, American Girl, Stranger in the Night, Too Much Ain't Enough, and then they finish with 4 covers. So Shout, I Fought the Law, Route 66, and I'm a King Bee. So man, I mean, that's just totally balls out rock and roll.
That was from 78 then, that show?
Yeah.
So that, they had 2 albums out at that point, right? Or they had 1 album out, plus they worked
Some
on
of
You're Gonna Get It. Yeah. So they didn't have a whole lot to pull from, but they maybe they were getting sick of some of their songs they had to play for their set over and over again, decided to start playing a lot of covers. They always played a lot of covers. I mean, I think the 15 or so times I saw him play, they played at least 2 covers, if not more, in every set. And these are for arena amphitheater crowds, so they weren't shying away from that, playing for their big audience.
So I think the next cover is again in the Pettyhead fandom, Shout's just one of those that is a quintessential live cover, right? It's one that you would love to see live. What I would say, maybe though, and I'll probably get battered for this one, is I think it's one of the only ones that it doesn't work quite as well when you just listen to the recording, as opposed to if you're watching it live or watching a DVD, because it's very performative. Because it's a really simple song, and it's just a big jam song. It's a great arrangement, and it's just a band having fun. But some of that doesn't always come. It's the same reason I don't listen to a lot of funk. Funk's great when you're watching it live and you can see the band interacting. A 10-15-minute jam, I don't know, it doesn't always carry quite as well just on record. What do you think about that?
And how long was this track? It looks like it was 9:33. Yeah. So they really got into it. And when I listen to it, I think it's kind of a show-off song. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're showing how well they can play. It really speeds up and showing that they can play really fast. Yeah. And it's it's just kind of a hardcore rocker and rock soul song. So just showing their chops, I think. And it does get the crowd involved. They take it down. They come back up. I mean, I've seen a few different bands perform it, and this is definitely one of the better cover versions. I think that the Heartbreakers could actually keep up with the song pretty well.
Well, again, it's another song that one of the notes I'd written down is, if you go back and listen to Stan's drumming on this, it's peak Stan Lynch. Like, he's just ferocious when he's in those faster sort of sections of the song. He's just laying into those tubs, and everyone describes him as a power drummer. And I always kind of bristle a little bit at that, because he's a very nuanced drummer as well when he needs to be. But on something like this, it's just full steam. He's full Dave Grohl mode, or Dave Grohl's Stan Lynch mode, maybe.
Yeah, and that one was at Richfield Coliseum in '83. So they must have really liked this recording to go back and grab it and put it back on this album. And we can talk about the selections here and how they're bouncing around, and most of it is from the Wiltern, but then they added the 2 Stevie songs from the Forum. We'll get into that in a second. What about the Stories We Could Tell? What do you think of that album closer?
I just love that song. It's so warm and happy and mellow. And that fiddle in the middle, it's again quite different to the original, in that they have that fiddle intro, and it's a harmony thing. So I would be stand on harmonies too, because obviously Howie wasn't with the band then, and it's just a great vocal part. Yeah, it's just a nice, gentle folk song, right? So I don't know that I would necessarily close with that in a concert. However, I'm sure that you're aware that when the Dirty Knobs toured and Stan filled in on drums, there were at least 2 dates where the end, that was the last song they would play, and Mike would just come out and they would do it acoustic. So Mike would play and Mike and Stan would sing Stories We Could Tell. So I think that's a nice nod back to this period in the Heartbreakers career, which I thought was really, really sweet.
Yeah, and I would say the lyrics really fit what they're going for at the end of the show too, because those two had played together so long and the stories they could tell. And you know, it was written by John Sebastian. He did of the Love and Spoonful. He did a version of it, and then the Everly Brothers. This one sounds a little bit more like the Everly Brothers version. I was listening to all three today,
Definitely.
And that's like I didn't realize who covered the song, initially until I dug into this. I'm not like I wasn't looking for that information until I had to speak intelligently about it. But it's another connection with my parents. My parents were, my mom especially was a big Everly Brothers fan, or is a big Everly Brothers fan. And, we talked about the Johnny Cash connection on a previous episode with my dad. And it's pretty cool that Petty covered an Everly Brothers song, even though maybe it was written by John Sebastian first. Really country folk vibe to it. I mean, I think you said folk. I got a country twangy vibe from it, but a nice track to close the album, I think.
Yeah, super cool. I only just noticed that every artist that they covered on this album starts with the. So it's the Everly Brothers, the Isley Brothers, the Animals, the Searchers, and the Byrds. Interesting. Is that a coincidence? Yes, it is.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, I think they were good covers to pick. And obviously we don't know what else is out there. I would have loved to have seen maybe a really clean version of Jaguar and Thunderbird, the Chuck Berry track that they used to do quite a bit in the early days, because that's a great song too. Maybe it doesn't fit quite as well into the set list, because that's a really sort of, it's a straight Chuck Berry tune, right? Which is why Mike Campbell plays it so bloody well, because he's got all those Berry bends down absolutely pat. But it would be kind of curious to see what else was kicking around, from that sort of the Coliseum show, or that Hammersmith Odeon show in '80. I'm wondering if they've got that whole, because they must have the whole thing, or at least a lot of it. That'd be a great live album to release later, and especially if they had video of it. That'd be fantastic to see them playing in '80 in the UK.
It seemed like they recorded a lot of their shows, if they're even back then pulling stuff from different years and different tours. I guess it's a good time to get into like what the purpose of this album was supposed to be, what it kind of turned into. I mean, it seemed like they did back-to-back shows at the Wiltern. I looked at that '85 tour, and a lot of times bands will do that. They'll have 2 or 3 dates at one venue they can control. They'll record all 3, and then they'll pick, and then this, the crowd kind of sounds the same because it's the same venue. They do the same set list, so the energy's sort of the same going through each track, right? And then they'll pick the best version of those 3 from those 3 shows to come up with their live show. Yeah. And it's not usually, sometimes they'll do one night, but I don't think a lot of bands do that these days. They tend to do at least 2, because there's some mistakes on this. If you listen,
it's just risky. It's really risky. If you just do one night, then you're at the whim of it. Like, even something could happen, a mic could drop out, someone's guitar could get unplugged. There's all sorts of things that could happen, which is reasons why you don't do that, right?
Yeah, and there's a few of and when I say mistakes are made, it's not with the playing, but there's a few feedback spots in a couple of the songs from the Wiltern shows. I think Refugee has one of them, and now that's totally fine if you're listening to here's a one-night snapshot from this tour, or this is what we wanted to play. So you kind of embrace the little quirks that you're going to hear when you go to see a show, because you're going to hear feedback usually in one song in every show, no matter where you go.
Yeah, of course.
But when you're trying to compile a bunch of different live versions of songs into this, it became kind of it doesn't surprise me a whole lot coming off of Southern accents. It became kind of an amalgamation of their live show at this time, and some of these songs they weren't even playing on this particular tour. So it is an interesting set list from that standpoint. I think it was nice that they put the 2 Stevie Nicks songs on there. I think they recognized how good those were. They wanted to release them, and they probably had a few other versions here that they wanted to get these out there. And maybe they weren't happy with what they got from the entirety of the set from the Wiltern show.
I basically guarantee it. Yeah, I mean, that's that thing of, because because it's the 7th, right? 7th of August, because I think they played the Wilton 7th and 8th, maybe, or 6th,
or 6th and 7th.
6th and 7th. Yeah. So you've not recorded both, so maybe the version of, let's say, Don't Do Me Like That, which doesn't appear on the album, but they played live that night, or Spike, or Don't Come Around Here No More. Maybe something about it just didn't quite land. And when they're going through, say, well, that's not us at our best, and let's not put that one on, right? So I think that happens with every act, right? I mean, especially because a band like this is playing 2 hours, you're not fitting all those songs onto the disc anyway. So then you can be a little bit more selective, and you can say, okay, well, what's the best representation? Like you said, this was their first full live album. Let's make it roughly representative of what a Heartbreakers concert experience feels like. And I think that's why we get so many covers, and why there's these other things thrown in. That's what I suspect anyway.
Yeah, and I can see why they did what they did. And if you listen to the album, you could tell that they're a great live band. I mean, I think just the first person that doesn't know Tom Petty very well, maybe they know Refugee and another hit or something, and they turn this on, they're like, oh, I think I want to see them live, and they sound really good live. So I think that the album served its purpose from that standpoint. I do wonder, like, why live albums are released at certain points in their career, artists' careers. This is after, I believe, 6 albums. So it's a great opportunity to get a bunch of the hits in front of people that maybe are new fans, but in a way that they're still going to want to go back and get the studio versions. Because a lot of these record companies don't want, their artists to put out, especially in the mid 80s, to put out an album that has all the hits on it.
Yeah.
Because they're cannibalizing their old discography. But doing it on a live album, and you'll see as I get into my producer here of the day, like, you can really put out like the best of, but have it be a live album, and you're not cannibalizing your old in any respect. You're probably going to end up driving more sales to some of those studio versions that people want to hear.
It works on all levels, right? Because like you said, you're getting a new product out there that hardcore fans want, but then you're also hitting a market where you might pick up some of those more casual fans. Queen did that brilliantly too with Live Killers. I remember sitting with Live Killers, and I started listening to, picking up other albums and thinking, well, what album's that off? Go find that in my dad's collection and listen to that, because that's a great track. Dreamer's Ball from Jazz or something. You're not going to appear that on a greatest hits thing, but it's a good way of sort of pushing people gently into these different areas, right? So, and the songs on there. So I'm just looking through the track list. There's a couple of songs at least on there that weren't released as singles, right? So It Ain't Nothing to Me, Rocking Around With You, Insider wasn't, obviously, Southern Accents wasn't. So yeah, there's they've got, the big hits that you need. You've got to put American Girl on there, you got to put Breakdown on there, Refugee, but then they've sort of introduced a few more of these things in there. So I think it's an interesting set list. Very different from the original gig though, right? So should we talk about that a little bit, maybe?
Sure.
So they open with American Girl, and that's the thing, you can sort of tell when they get to American Girl on the record, which is the 5th track, you can tell that that's not sequenced in the middle of a show. It's either the opener or the closer. That's where you've got to put that song, especially the way they play it, right? And then they go into You Got Lucky as the second song in the live performance at the Wiltern, which again, I was really blown away by how good that was. Not that I didn't think it would be, but because it's not a song that you would, it's almost like Don't Come Around Here No More, right? Where because it's so synthy and it's got a electronic drum and it's got a very specific feel on the record, you wonder how you're going to get that across. Well, what you just change it and you just make it more of a rock and roll song. It's so good. I was going to say too, like, I found it, one of the things I found completely galling with the album was how good It Ain't Nothing to Me is. It's like, what how, just in terms of performance, I think it's honestly probably one of the best 2 or 3 performances musically on the whole album. It's so tight, and you've got that ridiculous dirty sound that Mike licks in on the solo. And I'm kind of curious, I'm going to try and find the DVD because I want to see what he's playing there, because that doesn't sound like a Fender, it doesn't sound like one of his, it's definitely a Ricky, it sounds like a Gibson. And I know that Mike does play Gibsons here and there, but I don't remember seeing him play one live much, so I'm going to try and dig that out and find out. So I was like,
listening to this, I do want to see the live. I don't think I saw the live. I think it's on VHS, right? It's not DVD. A DVD, so it's probably going to be difficult to find. Yeah. In a normal way.
When I did look just out of interest, because I'm going to buy it, but I did look on the the, let's call it, the distributed internet backup system to see if there was a rip of it lying around, and there's nothing. I couldn't find anything anywhere, and there are few songs on YouTube but nothing comprehensive. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be picking it up. And I'll have to dig out a VHS player, I think, or get it digitized or something. So
you're gonna have to buy the VHS and a VCR.
Yeah,
You have to buy both.
Yeah. Well, I think there's this place in town. There's all these places you do. You know, they'll convert your wedding video. You know, for those of us who got married when there was still VHS,
yes,
which I did. We had to get it digitized, and I'll just take it there. I don't think I'll bother buying a player. So
then the fourth track was "Don't Do Me Like That," which we didn't get a version of that here. There was a live version on the Refugee Deluxe.
Yeah,
Dan the Torpedoes Deluxe version. But that's one of my favorite songs. So the fact that it was excluded is a little annoying.
Yeah.
I really like this version of Waiting.
Yeah, so good.
They, if I remember correctly, it was just kind of Tom. And I don't know if it was him on the guitar, but it was just Tom on the guitar for a while.
Yeah.
And then they really kicked in later on into the full song, which is very effective.
And it goes longer because it's clever, right? It's the waiting. So they're making you wait for it. Because usually if an artist does that, they'll do either the first verse or do a bit of an intro, an extended intro, do the first verse, and then the band comes in on the chorus. Or they'll do a verse and a chorus, and then the band comes in. But we get, I think it's verse, chorus, and it's after, it might even be after the bridge or right on the bridge where the band comes in. I can't remember exactly, but it's a very, again, it's a really bold way to do it, right? Because that song in a full arrangement is so good. And I was going to just mention quickly the version of Southern Accents, which was we'll talk about the two that come before, but Southern Accents was the 9th song in the playlist. This is one where I think there's about 2 or 3 better versions of Southern Accents live than this, and it doesn't get anywhere near the Gainesville version. And I think part of it is that the added guitar at the beginning, it's a bit jarring. I found that it was a bit much. It was a bit busy. Where Southern Accents in its best sort of moments is that simplicity and that sort of stark beauty, where that took away a little bit from it. So I'm not too sure. Maybe it was the cocaine thing again. Who knows?
Yeah, so it was the Waiting, I Need to Know, Don't Come Around Here No More, Spike, and then Southern Accents. So that's a good stretch of songs. We didn't get Don't Come Around Here No More on this as either. And you know, I don't think there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a officially released live version of Don't Come Around Here No More on Spotify for sure. I think.
I don't think so.
I think, but
no, I don't think there is.
There is a live version of it off of
there's
live at the Coliseum radio broadcast on Spotify. If people want to look that up,
yeah,
they do have a live version there, it's pretty good, but the sound on the whole recording isn't the greatest. So just be warned.
Yeah, and there's a few of those kicking around that they have official releases, but they're bootlegs, right? So they're, it's probably just recorded straight off the board. They've not done a ton of mixing or mastering on them or fixing anything. So it is what it is. And, again, a certain vintage of music fan, bootlegs were the holy grail, man. Like that's what you wanted. Like I remember picking up Queen live at, I think it was what was the Rainbow 74 gig? And I found that on an old tape cassette on the back of a shelf in some record store, and that was my first exposure to bootleg. So getting that feel, I think it's fine, but I didn't include any of those in my playlist just because sonically they don't tend to mesh quite as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's even on. There's like 5 of them on. You just do Tom Petty live, and you scroll down, you'll start to find them. But it's interesting that they're on Spotify as bootlegs or however they were released. Yeah. What the rules are regarding that, but it's nice to have them just to get a snapshot of the band at different times.
So yeah, he said, "Don't Come Around Here No More," Spike, Southern Accents, and Rebels. So they in the set list they put all 4 Southern Accent songs in sequence or sort of in order. So I think that's an interesting way to do that. And the version of Spike is on the original is quite long. So I guess about a 7 minutes or so. So.
That's a lot of time to spend on that song.
Well, because, and again, though, it's that thing of that song over the years, it developed and it got longer because Tom the way he would introduce it would get longer and longer and longer, and he'd tell the story for longer, right, to build it up. So again, it goes back to a little bit what we were talking about with Shout, where that performative element of it doesn't always come across if you're not in the room. It's like comedy, right? Comedy doesn't always work if you listen to it afterwards because you need to sort of be in the room to get the energy and you need the context of what's happened before and all those things. So I think that's, maybe another reason why they didn't include it.
So after Rebels, they went with Breakdown and Refugee to close the main set. And then they did 3 covers in the encore, a 4-song encore, A Little Bit of Soul by the Little Darlings, So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star by the Byrds, obviously. Make It Better, Forget About Me, which is their own track, a single. And then, which is funny that they used that in an encore.
I know.
After, and I don't know when Tom decided that it was quote unquote trash, but it's funny to see that as an encore. And then Route 66, Bobby Troop cover to close the. At least this is what Setlist FM says about the set list for that night, and for the other night, the night earlier too. So I wonder if you said this was just recorded from this one show. I wonder if the night before was kind of a rehearsal for the show, but they should have really been recording both nights to cover themselves.
Yeah. And if you go to livepeddy.com, which has all the bootlegs, there is a bootleg from the Wiltern. So it doesn't have the encore, but the main set list is definitely 100% accurate. So I would expect that the set list is correct. So yeah.
Now, could I take a slight detour here? I wanted to, I noticed when I was looking at this tour that on the August 5th, the day before they went up to Wiltern for their August 6th show, then obviously the one they recorded on the 7th, they played the Pacific Amphitheater, which is roughly 15 minutes from my house.
Oh, nice.
And I wanted to just run down this because the set list is a little bit different. I just wanted to run it down for you because it's pretty, to me, it looks pretty epic. American Girl, Listen to Her Heart to open, Dogs on the Run, You Got Lucky, It Ain't Nothing to Me, Don't Do Me Like That, The Waiting, I Need to Know, The Best of Everything, Change of Heart, Don't Come Around Here No More, and then Spike, Southern Accents, and Rebels, Breakdown, and then Refugee. And then they went into their encore, A Little Bit of Soul, So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, and then closed with Make It Better, Forget About Me. And the couple things jumped out at me is just that this would have been an amazing show to see. I mean, I wasn't anywhere near Costa Mesa in 1985. I was 12 years old living in Wisconsin, but this would have been a wonderful just set list to see. And then again, I think it's hilarious that they close with Make It Better, Forget About Me.
That's a wild decision. Decision, hey?
Tom decided he didn't like it. At some point, he must have liked it at that point. But, to hear The Best of Everything and Change of Heart, not often played live, Dogs on the Run, that would have been a really good show to see.
Well, you look at that 6, I just pulled it up too. So that 16, that could have been your live album right there.
Yeah.
I mean, what a track listing that is. Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. And they did 5 songs from Southern Accents on that one, because you throw Dogs on the Run into the mix.
Best of Everything as well. So
Best of Everything in there. Yeah, so 6. Oh, It Ain't Nothing to Me as well. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4,
7.
5, 6, 7.
Make it better.
7 of the 9.
Make it better as well.
Yeah, so 8 if you include the encore, right? So what's the only one missing is what's the only one we're missing here? Oh, well, yeah, of course, Mary's New Car, because why the hell would you play that live? I wonder if
only if Mary was there would you play that live.
I wonder if, because sometimes a song gets dropped from a set list because it's just not landing and people are not digging it or whatever. So maybe Make It Better. That was like, oh man, we're closing with this and everyone's left before we got to the end of the chorus.
Yeah, you could have you could close with, obviously, with Refugee or American Girl. Yeah, that's what he typically would close with. Sometimes he would play one of those 2 second to last and then play a quiet song at the end if he was in that sort of mood. And I think that was more, he just decided he was going to play a quiet song and it wasn't even on the set list.
Yeah.
But very typically he would close, or they would close his main set with Refugee and then close the show with American Girl. That seemed to be like the highs that he wanted to leave each set with.
When I believe, to show my football knowledge, I believe they call that an audible, don't they? When someone just makes a call on the field and they say, okay, well, this is what we call, but we're going to change it up. And I think the Heartbreakers were, apart from on certain tours, I think that would happened a lot. I'm guessing that happened a lot because Tom, if you're feeling the energy of the crowd, well, let's keep playing, let's do a couple more.
Certainly earlier, I think in the career, I think towards the end of the career, they were stuck to their set list at least, even though that would change sometimes night to night. But I think the audibles happened earlier in his career.
When you also get, you're locked in with a bigger production. When you're doing the 40th anniversary tour, you're doing especially something like when you've got this big set with the Southern Accents tour, you've got lighting cues and you've got a lot of other stuff that's going on to manage that performance other than just the guys on stage. You got to be a little bit respectful of, the people working behind the scenes to make sure everything's working. So, but anyways,
Yeah, that's what I
cool.
meant on those big arena and the big amphitheater tours.
Yeah.
Like my son got a set list from a copy of the set list from the 40th anniversary, and it was, they played exactly what they said they were going to play. But certainly at the Fillmore, there was all sorts of. That was the '97, so that was later in his career. But there was all sorts of audibles being played there.
Yeah, and I mean when we get to Fillmore, I've talked to other people about that, other fans of other bands, and it really is a unique situation. Like lots of bands do residencies, in Vegas and those kinds of things, but that one that's unique. And I still haven't pulled how many songs they played during that run, because I'll bet you you'd be looking at probably over 100 songs, or it must be somewhere close to that, which is bananas. Like most bands can't rehearse and get up to performance standard that many songs for that short of a run. So very, very cool. Okay, well, should we get into, so we're going to change things up, dear listeners, and the producer for a day here, we're not going to resequence this album. The thing that John wanted to do, because he's the king of Tom Petty playlists, as we have already established, is just put together our ideal live album to this point. And so, yeah, the way I approach this, John, I mean, we had this conversation. I've only gone for things that were recorded up to 1985. So obviously there were songs that were released up to 1985, but I think that you took a slightly different tack and just songs that were released up to 1995, but they were recorded in, let's say, at the Fillmore, then you've sort of gone with that version. So,
all right. So, and this is what I would push for if I was in charge of this back then when I was 12. And I don't think Tom would have gone for it, because they're such a good cover band. I mean, they love playing covers, and it's such a big part of their show. They probably would want to have at least 2 or 3, if not more, in this collection. But I looked at it like, okay, I think on a double LP you have room for 18 songs, so I basically went with that. I think you could maybe it'd be kind of close on the time limit on some of it, but I think they could have made it work. So I think what I would have done and what I would have pushed for is, you have six albums. Let's do, like, we won't necessarily call it a best of. I think artists kind of bristle at the idea of a greatest hits in the middle of their career, because they feel like it's something that artists do after their careers are basically over. But I think some bands have gone through at times and have done an effective job of doing like a best of so far, just recognizing that you're only 7 years into your career, you're not anywhere near the end.
Yeah.
But this could have been a really good opportunity to release an epic collection of his best, or their best music, and in a way that would bring in younger fans and really develop a whole new generation of fans, much like the Greatest Hits album did later on in his career. Like that really brought in a lot of college fans, college age fans at that point in his career. So I would have pushed for the 13 biggest hits, and that would be American Girl, Breakdown, I Need to Know, Listen to Her Heart, Don't Do Me Like That, Refugee, Here Comes My Girl. I'm going to include Even the Losers, even though it wasn't released as a single. It was getting lots of radio airplay, and it was considered a greatest hit for the Greatest Hits compilation. The Waiting, A Woman in Love, It's Not Me, You Got Lucky, Don't Come Around Here No More, and Rebels. So that's 13 of the 18 spots right there with the big singles. And I did exclude a few of the minor singles that maybe I'm not as fond of, including Make It Better, Forget About Me. I think Change of Heart you could make a case for.
Right.
But then I thought, okay, showcase those mid-tempo ballads that we have talked about over the course of several podcasts. Include a live version of The Wild One, Forever. Include a live version of Surrender, which they weren't really able to get down for the studio, but they did record it, I believe, in '85, and that shows up on the live anthology. Include this version of Insider with Stevie Nicks. Straight Into Darkness, include a version of that, and then include a version of Southern Accents as well. And I think those 18 songs, whatever order, maybe you put these last 5, you put 1 on each side with 2 on one of the sides, and kind of sprinkle in all the hits throughout, and you have a epic something that 12-year-old John Paulsen would have bought and just totally got into him, and then at some point would have gone back and bought all the studio albums to really dig into Tom's career. I think there's a couple that were tough, and it's just the Change of Heart. There was no live version available yet, released for me to look at or listen to, and The Best of Everything. So they were playing that on this tour. I would love to hear live versions of that from '85. To see if maybe that replaces one of these other, maybe replaces Surrender or something. But I think that they would never have gone for it because they love covers when they play live, and if they want this to replicate a live show, then they would want covers on it. But if you want it to sell a ton of albums and maybe go 5 times platinum and drive a bunch of sales and new fans to your shows, then this would have been a really wild way to do it.
That's interesting. I'm assuming you've got a Spotify playlist.
I do. It's not in order and yet, but it's I definitely have the 18 down, and and one of the problems is that one of the live versions is of Don't Come Around Here No More, and it's from that radio show that doesn't sound as good. All the other stuff was released officially by Petty and his estate.
Okay, well, we'll put that together and we'll send it out so people can listen to it. So I went to, this is the nerd thing, right? I went to great pains. I basically thought, well, I'm going to double album. So I've got 4 sides. So I sequenced for 4 sides, check length for 4 sides. I made sure that everything flowed. And then again, like you do, you want to make sure you've got this blend of, okay, well, how would it flow within a concert, and how would you make that work? So disc 1, side 1, open with Refugee, live at the Wiltern. Just like I said, I think that's just a phenomenal live version of that song. Rip straight into I Need to Know, live at the Wiltern. Let's keep the pace up. Even the Losers, live off the anthology, because again, it's such a great version of that song. And then finish side 1 with Breakdown, live at the Wiltern. So they'd like open up really, really strong. Get those like I said, if you're selling this to people who are going to sort of latch onto Tom Petty, you're going to hook them with that first side. Side 2, open with The Waiting, live at the Wiltern. It's a little bit slower, so we can open, the flip side of side B of record 1 can open with that song. I also went with The Wild One Forever, because again, I think it's a deep cut that really works on this side, as you'll see. Again, Night Watchman, this is mainly deep cuts on this side. Night Watchman and Spike, I've got, so side B is The Waiting, The Wild One Forever, Night Watchman and Spike, because I think that's, again, if you're thinking about a Tom Petty concert, they're going to throw a few of those in, and they're probably going to throw them in round about this part of the show, I think. Or we've burned your faces off with 4 huge hits. Now we're going to sort of drop you in something for the hardcore fans. Take side 2 off the turntable. Go get the next disc, put side 1 on. Listen to a Heart. At the record plant from American Treasure. Needles and Pins and Insider, I'm including there definitely, because I think those 2 just dovetail so well, and they show that relationship between Tom and Stevie beautifully. And then finish that side with Fooled Again, I Don't Like It. And that is the one that I picked from that New York gig. So the sound quality isn't quite as good. And the crowd noise is obviously way, way different because they're in a small room there, right, as opposed to an 1,800 seater. And then the last side of the album, A Woman in Love, It's Not Me. Don't Do Me Like That from the Odeon, from the Damn the Torpedoes Deluxe Edition. Straight Into Darkness, I think, is my second last, and then American Girl live. So I think that the encore there, if we're thinking about it, I've only gone 16, because I was paying attention, very close attention to the time constraints. I think you could almost sort of treat that as, there's going to be other songs in this set, but Don't Do Me Like That, Straight Into Darkness, American Girl, that's my encore. That's what I was sort of thinking about in my brain, is the last 3 songs. I think, man, that would be so killer. And I've listened to it. When you listen to it in sequence, I think it works. I think it flows. So I'm really curious when you send me your playlist now. That's what I always like doing, is obviously listen to them in sequence. I know that you pay a lot of attention to that when you're putting these things together. So I'm curious how you're gonna land them. So
I did do the exact same thing for my Wildflowers too. So, looking at it, even as side by side, an album side by side, but also just the whole CD, how it would flow. So I didn't have time to do that with this.
Yeah.
But I wanted to look at it like a career retrospective to this point, and then figure out the track order after that. But that sounds like a really good, I do want to listen to your sequence now. After you sold it pretty well there, Kevin.
I'll send you the link for sure. And it's funny too, because we were talking about Surrender. I originally had that on there, I think in place of Fooled Again, because just because of that quality. But again, I fooled against such a great live track, and that version's really, really good. Thought, well, I'll include that on there. And then I also didn't, I put Needles and Pins on there because, again, just because those two, they just work so well, and Stevie's just on those songs. But I didn't want to put too many covers on there because I want to listen to Tom Petty. You know, I like covers, I love them, but I like them more when I go watch them live, which again, it's brilliant having those in the Fillmore because you get this, it really is an important snapshot of who that band was at that time. But if I'm going to go see a Tom Petty concert, I don't necessarily want to hear 5 covers. Because then you're taking away, maybe you're not going to play Refugee, you're going to play a cover. Maybe you're not going to play, God forbid, American Girl, and now we get a cover. So I don't know. It's been a bit selfish, but that was my reason.
Yeah, it definitely got going to see him or see them. I always say, Tom, but like seeing the band and they get into covers and they're going to play them, but you're like, and then by the end of the show, you're like, oh, they didn't play The Waiting, or they didn't play Here Comes My Girl. They could have played here, or Listen to Her Heart. And it's just like, they always put on a great show. I don't say usually, they always put on a great show.
Yeah.
But it was always like that. Oh, if they just, I don't need to hear a Chuck Berry song.
Yeah.
Even though they have a ton of fun with it, I want to hear Listen to Her Heart, or I want to hear The Waiting, or, some of these, they're big hits. They're minor hits for him or medium-sized hits for him that he would not always include on his set lists. And he understood that. I think on the 40th anniversary tour, it was really very greatest hits heavy. Probably wasn't sure if they were going to do another big tour like that again. But certainly throughout the years, it was, it was always in that, that kind of that track 5 to 10 range where, okay, we've played a few hits to start, and we're going to throw a few covers at you or minor hits at you, and then, or just minor songs, album cuts, and then get back to the mid to late set, which was always pretty epic. I mean, by the time he had released Wildflowers, he had so many hits, recognizable songs to pull from that you couldn't satisfy everybody in the audience, because there's always going to be favorites that are left off the set list.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the catalog, yes, like I said, by that point, the catalog's ridiculous. And there's probably, he could have played a 20 song set of deep cuts and everyone would have gone home happy. That's how good that catalog was by that point. It's the same thing. Like, when I went and saw U2 here years and years ago now, and left, like, really enjoyed the show. But then afterwards in the hotel thinking, oh man, they didn't do this one. Oh, they didn't do that one. I'd love to hear this one. So did you ever, when you saw him live, were you ever waiting for a song that they didn't play? Or was it just always afterwards you just thought, oh, they didn't play The Waiting? Oh, that's weird. Okay.
I think you go in, you hope that you hear your favorites. And I didn't find myself, because he had, especially after Full Moon Fever, Into the Great Wide Open, Wildflowers, there's just so many hits that you're getting songs you like repetitive, like you're getting them, like, and you're not thinking about, oh, I wish he would play this. The only time that I really went into a certain show wanting to hear a song was the 40th anniversary tour. I saw that he was occasionally playing Walls from the She's the One soundtrack, which is one of my favorite songs of his, if not my favorite song of his. I tweeted at Tom Petty and said, I really hope that you play Walls at the show in Milwaukee. And he came out and he opened it. He goes, this one's by request, my request. And he played Walls. And I like to think that somebody in his camp saw my tweet and said, hey, play Walls tonight for 4 John. But who knows what happened there. But that was probably, and I was like a little teary, because it was like, you at that point, you don't know how many times you're going to see them play again. And so for him to play that other than that, I don't really think, because you're going to get Refugee, you're going to get American Girl. And I think I said this during the Damn the Torpedoes pod, but I heard Refugee so many times, and it's not my favorite of his hits. Like, it's a great song, but you heard it at every show. And I was always like, well, maybe I could, I'd rather hear Here Comes My Girl, or Listen to Her Heart, or Don't Do Me Like That, especially. So there were times where it was just like, all right, don't have to live like a refugee. And you're kind of like, but the crowd loves it. And, the energy is amazing. So I think that pretty much sums up, it was never like, oh, I want to hear this, and I didn't hear it. there's certain bands, maybe like a Weezer, or
Right.
maybe Cake or somebody like that I really like, and you want to hear this specific minor hit or medium hit, and you think they might play it, and then
Yeah.
you're kind of waiting for it, you never get it. But that never really happened with Tom.
Yeah. If I was going to see Cake and they didn't play Comfort Eagle, I'd be disappointed when I left, right? I mean, I don't know if they do, because that's such a weird song. I don't know if they do play that on live, right? So
they do sometimes. They have a very varied playlist, but this is not a Cake podcast. Although I'd be interested in doing a Cake podcast if you ever wanted to.
Be a good one to dig into. But it is that thing of, like you said, I think, because I'm the same. Like, I've seen Foo Fighters 4 times. I don't need to see Everlong live. Like, it's a great song, but it's the energy in the room, and it's those little moments where they do change just a little bit of it, or Mike might take a bit of an extra solo or whatever it might be. Being in the room when you listen to it with a bunch of people who's not the same bunch of people you listened to it the last time, I think it makes it okay, right? It makes it a little bit more sort of. I still enjoyed it. And again,
I think it's tough. I think it's really tough, especially you get to where Tom was at the end of his career. It's really tough to make a set list. It has to be like to play stuff that you also want to play and you haven't played a million times.
Yeah.
But then also satisfy the audience, and then also vary things up enough from the last tour, or maybe the last 2 tours, that somebody might have come to see you on all of them. Like,
yeah.
And then maybe what you played in Milwaukee, the last 2 times, because those are probably the same fans that are coming back to see you. Do they want to hear, instead of Listen to Her Heart, should we play Here Comes My Girl? Like, it's got to be a lot of cajoling and difficulty to try to, especially when you have that much quality in your discography. It's crazy.
Most fans, like you were talking about earlier about that 3-album run, you talk about Integrate Wide, Full Moon Fever, Integrate Wide Open, Wildflowers. You could just pull from those 3 albums easily. And have them be mainly hits. That's how good that 3-album run was. Well, there was 5 singles from Full Moon Fever, and they all charted. Like, there you go. You can just build your set off those 3 albums. So when you add in the other 13, plus some Wilburys, plus the covers, like, geez, I mean, it's no wonder they had so much trouble doing it.
Well, yeah, who knows what they, if they did. I mean, you probably want. I love to. That's the stuff that fascinates me, is like, what is the meeting like? Like, okay, what are we playing on this tour? And they do, like, and the 40th anniversary tour, they did switch up some songs here and there. I don't know if it was always 2 shows in the same region or the same city.
Right.
They might have switched things up because people come to both shows. Or maybe they just get sick of playing the exact same set list as well. That might get a little tiresome.
Yeah, I mean, a band like the Heartbreakers, they would. They're a live band. They don't want to go and play. Yeah, I mean, they're not, Iron Maiden when they tour now. It's greatest hits. It's the same set pretty much all the way through. But again, that's a production thing too. But no, I mean, of course you want to go out there and play you've got to have fun, because if you're not having fun, that's going to come across the audience. I'm sure we've both seen live bands where you think, I don't buy a second of this. They're not enjoying themselves at all up there, right? It's so I suspect that, and it would be interesting to ask. Certainly later on, I get the feeling that Tom probably dictated most of that. But I'm sure there would have been sort of conversations about, okay, we've got these, if we're doing 18 songs on, was it 18 or something on the 40th anniversary? We're going to keep 15 locked in for sure. These ones we're definitely going to do, because then we can do a really good job and give people what they've come to see. Those other 3 spots, maybe then it's like, well, Ben, what should we play? Or Mike, is there something that we haven't played in a while, or whatever it might be? I think that's what I imagine that process would probably look like. I can't see it being too democratic, because Tom was the band leader, right? I mean, that was a clear delineation between sort of running the band. That was Tom. He did that.
Yeah, they played 18. In the final show, Rockin' Around With You, Mary Jane's Last Dance, You Don't Know How It Feels, Forgotten Man, I Won't Back Down, Free Fallin', Breakdown, Don't Come Around Here No More, It's Good to Be King, Crawling Back to You, Wildflowers, Learning to Fly, You're So Bad, I Should Have Known It, Refugee, Running Down a Dream to close the main set, which is Running Down a Dream. We haven't talked about that album yet, but that was always a closer too. And then You Wreck Me and American Girl to close the show in his career.
That is it's a staggering set of songs. And again, like you said, there's another 18 that if you put a totally different 18, you'd say exactly the same thing. You'd be like, wow, what a set that is,
Yeah, I mean, there's no Listen to Her Heart. There's no Here Comes My Girl. There's no The Waiting. Don't Do Me Like That. Just off the top of my head, just
Even the Losers.
Even the Losers. Like, it's incredible, the depth of his catalog.
It's bizarre. Yeah, we've talked about it, I think, probably ad nauseum now, and people are going to get bored, but I still go back to, I don't know another artist who, I mean, the Beatles, but the Beatles didn't have as many albums. They didn't do it for as long. That had that sustained level of just quality all the way through with no real, I mean, Southern Accents, Light Me Up About Enough, again, that was a little bit of a wobble in terms of that, but that was more to do with trying to shake things up and trying to do something different than it was actually a drop in Tom's ability to write songs. There's a lot of other influences came to bear there, but barring those two albums, and even on those albums, some great songs, but barring those two albums, the consistency of those albums, it's just, I don't know another artist who's ever had that.
Well, I think, you mentioned the wobbles, the drugs might have had something to do with it. And I think Tom admitted that as well. It's like they just weren't in the right headspace. And anytime you're ingesting large amounts of drugs, then it's usually not going to work out great for your creativity. I mean, I guess it worked for the Beatles, their LSD experiences, but I don't know.
I think it depends
I think that messed
on the
with
drugs too, right?
Yeah, that messed with his creative process, I think, and that's why we got some wobbles. Maybe some decisions were made that he wouldn't have made if he would, a little more clear-headed.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the end of season 6 now, and into season 7. I'm going to be talking about Let Me Up, I've Had Enough. And again, there's a decision there not to bring in an outside producer. That I'm going to end up talking about that a lot on that album, I know, because it's almost always a bad decision. Almost always. Not many people can produce their own record really, really well because you don't have anyone curbing your excesses. You don't have anyone saying, actually, you could do that better. So there's, like you said, those decisions are whatever they are. But again, what's the next album that comes out of that? Well, it's Full Moon Fever. So it was, I think the dip and sort of the push back into, well, I need to try something totally different now. I'll go work with Jeff Lynne. And then on from there, then it's just gravy all the way out, right? So
we are getting so close to the stretch that I'm really excited to talk about with Full Moon Fever, Into the Great Wide Open, the greatest hits album, Wildflower, She's the One, Echo. This is a wonderful run of albums for him.
In every way. Songwriting's great, the musicianship's great, the production on those albums is superb. Yeah, I can't. The first one, because I remember when I started the podcast, I really want to get to Hard Promises because I love that album. And now it's like, yeah, but look forward and look what I've got. Like when I get to Wildflowers, geez, that might take me a year because I've got so much to talk about on that album. So
might be a double episode.
Okay, so that's Pack Up the Plantation. I mean, it's been a lot of fun to talk about. And it was good fun going back and listening to it because it's not an album I listen to a ton. I think like you, I've got my sort of live playlist that I listen to a little bit more because, there's certain songs on Pack Up the Plantation that I could take or leave more or less, and some stuff that isn't on there that I like listening to. But going back and listening to it again and thinking about it in the context of it's 85 and they've done Southern accents and there's all this stuff going on, and so they bring the horns in and then you get these weird outcuts. So it was a lot of fun to go back and listen to it. And I don't think it, as a flow, as a live album, I don't think it is. I think maybe I would dare say maybe a little bit better, but I think it's that great snapshot of where the Heartbreakers were and who they were at that time.
Yeah, and they did a pretty good job, even though they ended up splicing together 5 shows, I think, total. It sounded like it could be from the same show. So they did at least look at that. And, I think it made sense to bring in the Stevie tracks because those are so good. 2 of my 3 highlights for her on Needles and Pins and Insider. And it served the purpose. I think it's just I don't know if they call it the obligatory live album. But this does feel like they felt like it was time.
Yeah.
I would have pitched something else, as I mentioned, but it does show how great they were as a live band, and the covers, certainly they put their own flair on most of them, and just a really, really, really strong live band. I think this album proves that.
Okay. Well, you know what, folks, I think that's probably enough for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, I wasn't too sure what I was going to do with Pack Up the Plantation, so I was very happy when John suggested that we just get online and hash it out. And luckily, it worked out that we both had time this week, so it'll be going out at the end of season 6, and then we'll start with season 7. So don't forget to go follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Tom Petty Project and on Twitter at Tom Petty Project. And also go check out the Deep Dive Podcast Network at Deep Dive Podnet because there's a ton of stuff on there that you might like. John, where can our listeners find you?
Twitter, 444_John, the number 4FOR, the number 4_ John. And that's only if you want either my fantasy football takes or my movie, TV, music picks, which I sometimes will put on Twitter as well.
Deadly. Yeah, you should go check out Johnny's. He's a superstar in that world. So until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy. And I'll be back with you next week to talk about the first song on Let Me Up, brackets I've Had Enough, Jamming Me. Bye-bye.